When billionaire heir Christopher Blackwood's racist mother invited his black ex-girlfriend Jasmine to his engagement party, she thought it would be the perfect opportunity to humiliate the gold digger publicly. But as the black limousine pulled up and Jasmine stepped out holding a baby, everything was about to change forever. The crisp autumn evening cast long shadows across the Blackwood estate as Jasmine Monroe sat in her modest apartment, staring at the elegant invitation that had arrived 3 days ago. The thick, cream-colored cardstock felt foreign in her calloused hands, hands that had spent countless hours caring for patients, changing diapers, and working double shifts to make ends meet. The gold-embossed letters seemed to mock her from the expensive paper. Eleanor Blackwood cordially invites you to celebrate the engagement of Christopher Blackwood and Priscilla Worthington. Jasmine's 18-month-old son Isaiah babbled happily from his high chair, oblivious to the storm of emotions churning in his mother's chest. She traced the elegant script with her finger, remembering a time when she thought she might have been the one walking down an aisle toward Christopher. That dream had died 2 years ago in Eleanor Blackwood's pristine sitting room, where she'd been told in no uncertain terms that she would never be good enough for their family. The memory still stung. Eleanor had sat behind her mahogany desk like a queen passing judgment, her steel-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, her cold blue eyes assessing Jasmine as if she were an unwelcome insect. "You seem like a lovely girl," Eleanor had said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "But surely you understand that Christopher has obligations to his family, to his future, to people of his own social standing." The pause before those last words had been deliberate, calculated to cut deep. Christopher had chosen his inheritance over their love without even putting up a fight. He'd mumbled apologies through text messages, sent flowers with generic cards, and eventually stopped trying altogether. Jasmine had discovered she was pregnant 2 months after their relationship ended, but her pride had prevented her from reaching out. She would raise Isaiah alone before she'd beg for scraps from the Blackwood table. Now, holding this invitation, Jasmine wondered what cruel game Eleanor was playing. Her best friend Carmen had been furious when she heard about it. "That woman has some nerve," she'd said, pacing around Jasmine's small living room. "She's obviously trying to humiliate you. Don't give her the satisfaction." But something in Jasmine's heart told her to go. Not for Eleanor, not for Christopher, but for herself. She'd spent 2 years rebuilding her life, finishing her master's degree in public health while working full-time as a nurse. She'd developed a revolutionary maternal health program for underserved communities that was already showing incredible results. She wasn't the same woman who'd been dismissed from that sitting room. The night of the engagement party arrived with an unseasonable chill. Jasmine had spent hours getting ready, not out of vanity, but out of determination. She'd chosen a simple black dress that she'd bought on sale, but it fit her perfectly and made her feel confident. Her hair was pulled back in an elegant updo, and she'd applied just enough makeup to highlight her natural beauty. Most importantly, she decided to bring Isaiah with her. If Eleanor Blackwood wanted to see who Jasmine really was, she would see all of her, including the beautiful son who gave her life meaning. The surprise came when Jasmine stepped outside her apartment building. A sleek black limousine was waiting at the curb, its driver holding a sign with her name. She approached cautiously, Isaiah secure in her arms. "There must be some mistake," she told the uniformed driver. But he simply smiled and opened the door. "No mistake, ma'am. You're Jasmine Monroe, aren't you? This ride has been arranged and paid for. My instructions are to take you wherever you need to go tonight." Jasmine hesitated for a moment, then decided to embrace the unexpected luxury. She settled into the plush leather seats with Isaiah, who was delighted by the tinted windows and soft lighting. As they drove through the city toward the Blackwood estate, she wondered who could have arranged this. Carmen swore it wasn't her, and Jasmine couldn't think of anyone else who would have both the means and the inclination to provide such an extravagant gesture. The Blackwood mansion was ablaze with lights when they arrived, its sprawling gardens illuminated by hundreds of small lanterns. Valets were taking keys from guests stepping out of expensive cars, Bentleys, Rolls-Royces, and Ferraris that cost more than most people made in a year. When the limousine pulled up to the main entrance, conversations seemed to pause. Jasmine could see curious faces turning toward the tinted windows, wondering which celebrity or dignitary was about to emerge. The driver came around and opened her door with a flourish. Jasmine stepped out gracefully, Isaiah comfortable in her arms, and immediately felt the weight of dozens of stares. She recognized some of the faces from society pages and business magazines, the Blackwood's wealthy friends and business associates. Their expressions ranged from curious to confused to barely concealed disdain when they realized who she was. Eleanor Blackwood appeared at the top of the marble steps as if she'd been waiting for this moment. She was resplendent in a silver gown that probably cost more than Jasmine's annual salary, her jewelry catching the light like ice in winter sun. Her smile was perfectly crafted for the cameras that were discreetly positioned around the entrance, but her eyes were cold as Arctic wind. "Jasmine, darling," Eleanor called out, her voice carrying across the courtyard with theatrical warmth. "How wonderful that you could join us for this special occasion." She descended the steps with regal grace, her arms outstretched as if greeting a long-lost friend. But when she reached Jasmine, her embrace was as cold as her smile, and her whispered words were meant for Jasmine's ears alone. "I do hope you understand what tonight is really about." Christopher appeared behind his mother, looking uncomfortable in his perfectly tailored tuxedo. He was still handsome, that hadn't changed, but there was something different about him now. He looked older, more tired, and when his eyes met Jasmine's, she saw a flicker of something that might have been regret. Beside him stood Priscilla Worthington, a tall, willowy blonde whose beauty was as polished and perfect as her pedigree. She clung to Christopher's arm with the confidence of someone who had never doubted her place in the world. "Christopher," Jasmine said simply, inclining her head in greeting. She didn't trust herself to say more, not with Isaiah in her arms and dozens of eyes watching their interaction. Christopher opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Priscilla stepped forward. "You must be Jasmine," she said, her voice sweet but with an undertone of condescension. "Christopher has told me so much about you. How brave of you to come tonight, and with a baby no less. Is this yours?" The question was asked with such innocent curiosity that it took a moment for the insult to land. The implication was clear, surprised that someone like Jasmine would be brazen enough to bring a child to such an elegant affair. "This is my son, Isaiah," Jasmine replied with quiet dignity. "He's 18 months old." She didn't elaborate on his parentage, didn't feel the need to justify her choices to these people. Isaiah, sensing the tension, reached out toward the twinkling lights with delight, his innocent joy a stark contrast to the undercurrents of hostility swirling around them. Eleanor seized the moment with practiced ease. "Well, isn't he precious?" she said, though her tone suggested she found him anything but. "I suppose single motherhood keeps you quite busy. It must be challenging, working and raising a child alone." The words were carefully chosen to sound sympathetic while highlighting Jasmine's situation for everyone to hear. Murmurs rippled through the gathered guests, and Jasmine felt their judgment like physical weight. "I managed just fine," Jasmine replied, keeping her voice steady. She refused to be baited into defending her choices or explaining her circumstances to people who had already made up their minds about her worth. Eleanor smiled that cold smile again and took Jasmine's arm with false warmth. "Of course you do, dear. Now come, let me introduce you to some of our guests. I'm sure they'd love to hear about your work." The way she said the word work made it sound like something distasteful, as if Jasmine's career as a nurse was somehow beneath notice. As they moved through the crowd, Jasmine became acutely aware of the whispered conversations that followed in their wake. She caught fragments of words, gold digger, inappropriate, desperation, and felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. But she kept her head high, focusing on Isaiah's happy babbling and the feel of his small hand patting her shoulder. Eleanor led them to the center of the grand ballroom, where a small platform had been set up for toasts and speeches. The room fell silent as Eleanor took the microphone, her commanding presence drawing every eye. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the ornate space, "as we celebrate the engagement of my son Christopher to the lovely Priscilla, I thought it would be appropriate to acknowledge all the people who have been part of Christopher's journey to this moment." Jasmine felt her stomach drop as Eleanor's gaze found her in the crowd. "Some people come into our lives to teach us important lessons about what we truly value," Eleanor continued, her words carefully crafted to sound philosophical while delivering their intended blow. "Tonight we have a special guest who represents that kind of learning experience. Jasmine Monroe, Christopher's former friend, has joined us with her beautiful son." The spotlight found Jasmine in the crowd, and she squinted against its brightness, Isaiah stirring in her arms at the sudden attention. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her, could practically hear the thoughts running through their minds. Eleanor's smile was triumphant as she continued, "I thought it might be meaningful for Jasmine to share a few words about moving forward and finding one's proper place in life." It was a masterful trap. If Jasmine refused to speak, she would look petty and bitter. If she spoke and showed any emotion, any hurt or anger, she would confirm their worst assumptions about her character. But as she stood there feeling the weight of their collective judgment, something unexpected happened. Instead of feeling small or ashamed, Jasmine felt a surge of strength that surprised her. She walked toward the platform with measured steps, Isaiah content in her arms. She accepted the microphone from Eleanor with a gracious nod and turned to face the crowd. For a moment, she simply stood there, taking in the sea of faces, some curious, some hostile, some simply indifferent. Then she began to speak. "Thank you for this opportunity," she said, her voice clear and steady. "2 years ago, I learned an important lesson about the difference between what we want and what we need. I wanted to be part of a world that didn't value who I truly was. I needed to find my own worth, my own purpose, my own path." She shifted Isaiah to her other arm, and he chose that moment to let out a small cry. Instead of being flustered, Jasmine simply began to sway gently, her voice never wavering as she continued to speak while soothing her son. "What I learned is that real strength isn't about the size of your bank account or the prestige of your family name. It's about getting up every day and doing work that matters, even when nobody notices. It's about raising a child with love and dignity, even when people judge you for doing it alone." Isaiah had calmed down, but Jasmine continued to hold him close as she spoke. "I work as a nurse in a community clinic where we see mothers who can't afford prenatal care, babies who go without proper nutrition, families who struggle just to survive. Over the past 2 years, I've developed a program that has reduced maternal mortality rates in our community by 40%. We've helped hundreds of women have healthy pregnancies and safe deliveries." She could see that some faces in the crowd had changed, their expressions shifting from dismissive to interested. "I'm completing my master's degree in public health, and my research on community-based maternal care is being published in the Journal of Community Medicine next month. But more than any of that, I'm proud to be raising a son who will grow up knowing that a person's worth isn't determined by their wealth or status, but by their character and their contributions to the world." The room was completely silent now, hanging on her every word. Even Eleanor's carefully composed expression had slipped slightly, showing a flicker of uncertainty. Jasmine looked directly at Christopher, who was staring at her with something that looked like recognition, as if he were seeing her clearly for the first time. "So I want to thank everyone who helped me find my true path," Jasmine concluded, her voice warm with genuine gratitude. "Sometimes the greatest gift someone can give you is showing you that you deserve better than what they're offering. Christopher, Priscilla, I wish you both genuine happiness. And Mrs. Blackwood, thank you for the reminder that dignity can't be bought or inherited. It has to be earned every single day." She handed the microphone back to Eleanor with a slight smile and stepped down from the platform. The applause that followed was uncertain at first, then grew stronger as some guests seemed to realize they had just witnessed something remarkable. Jasmine didn't wait to see Eleanor's reaction. She made her way toward the exit, ready to leave with her head held high. But as she reached the edge of the ballroom, a voice called out behind her. Miss Monroe, please wait. She turned to see an elderly gentleman approaching, his silver hair perfectly styled, his bearing dignified despite his advanced age. He was well-dressed, but not ostentatious, and there was something familiar about his kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "I'm Dr. Harrison Ford," he said, extending his hand. "Not the actor," he added with a gentle smile that made Isaiah gurgle with delight. "I've been listening to your speech with great interest. I wonder if we might have a private word." Jasmine glanced around the ballroom where conversations were resuming but with a different energy than before. Eleanor was standing near the platform looking frustrated and confused, while Christopher seemed to be having an intense whispered conversation with Priscilla. "Of course," Jasmine replied, curious about this stranger who radiated such calm authority. Dr. Ford led them to a quiet alcove away from the crowd. He looked at Isaiah with genuine warmth, making silly faces that delighted the toddler. "What a beautiful boy," he said softly. "He has your eyes, but something about his smile reminds me of someone else." He looked up at Jasmine with an expression she couldn't quite read. "May I ask, did you know your grandmother well?" The question caught Jasmine off guard. "I never knew her," she replied. "My mother said she died when I was very young. Why do you ask?" Dr. Ford's hands were trembling slightly as he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small photograph. It was old and slightly faded, but the image was clear, a young black woman with Jasmine's exact eyes and Isaiah's smile, wearing a nurse's uniform from what looked like the 1960s. "This is my daughter, Grace," Dr. Ford said quietly. "She died in a car accident 30 years ago, but not before she had a beautiful daughter of her own, a daughter she named Jennifer, who later changed her name to Jasmine." He looked up at her with tears in his eyes. "You're my granddaughter, and this precious boy is my great-grandson." Jasmine felt the world tilt around her. She sank into a nearby chair, Isaiah still in her arms, staring at the photograph with shock and disbelief. "That's impossible," she whispered. "My mother never mentioned— she said my father's family wasn't interested in knowing us." "Your mother was protecting you," Dr. Ford said gently, sitting across from her. "When Grace died, her husband, your grandfather, blamed me for not accepting their interracial marriage sooner. He told me I had lost the right to be part of your life. I respected his wishes, but I never stopped looking for you. When your mother passed away 5 years ago, I hired investigators to find you, but you'd moved several times, changed your name when you got married, and then divorced." He paused, studying her face with wonder. "When I heard about tonight's engagement party and saw the guest list, I couldn't believe it when I saw your name. I had to come see for myself if it was really you. And when I heard you speak just now about your work in maternal health, about reducing mortality rates— Jasmine, that's exactly what your grandmother dedicated her life to. She was a pioneering nurse midwife who opened the first clinic for low-income mothers in this city." Jasmine's mind was reeling. She looked at the photograph again, seeing not just the resemblance, but the same determined expression she saw in her own mirror every morning. "I don't understand," she said. "If you're my grandfather, then how?" Dr. Ford smiled sadly. "I'm the founder of the Ford Foundation for Medical Research. I've spent my entire career trying to make up for the mistakes I made as a young man, when I was too proud and too prejudiced to accept that my daughter could love someone regardless of race. I lost precious years with Grace because of my ignorance, and then I lost the chance to know you because of someone else's pain and pride." He leaned forward, his voice earnest. "But I never stopped hoping I'd find you. And now that I have, I want to make up for lost time. Jasmine, I've been looking for someone exactly like you to take over the Foundation's community health initiatives. Someone with your passion, your expertise, your understanding of what these communities really need." The room seemed to be spinning. Jasmine looked around the alcove, half expecting to wake up from what felt like an impossible dream. This is too much. I can't process." "I know it's overwhelming," Dr. Ford said gently, "but there's more." The foundation has $50 million dedicated specifically to maternal and child health programs. I want you to direct those efforts. And as my granddaughter, as my only living family, you and Isaiah are my heirs. From across the ballroom, Eleanor Blackwood's voice cut through the ambient chatter. She was clearly agitated, speaking loudly enough for others to hear. I simply don't understand what that woman thought she was accomplishing with that little speech. Some people have such grandiose ideas about their own importance. Dr. Ford's expression hardened slightly. He stood up and offered Jasmine his arm. Would you mind if we made a small announcement of our own? He asked with a mischievous glint in his eye. Still in shock, Jasmine allowed herself to be led back toward the main gathering. Dr. Ford approached the platform with the confidence of someone accustomed to commanding attention. Eleanor was still holding court near the microphone, but she fell silent when she saw them approaching. Excuse me, Dr. Ford said politely but firmly. Might I have a moment? His voice carried the authority of someone who had spent decades in boardrooms and medical conferences. Eleanor, recognizing power when she saw it, even if she didn't immediately recognize him, stepped aside reluctantly. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Ford began, his voice carrying easily through the ballroom. I apologize for interrupting your celebration, but I've just made the most wonderful discovery. Tonight I've been reunited with family I thought I'd lost forever. He gestured for Jasmine to join him, and she stepped forward with Isaiah, still feeling as if she were moving through a dream. This remarkable young woman is my granddaughter, Jasmine Monroe. And this beautiful boy is my great-grandson, Isaiah. The murmur that ran through the crowd was immediate and intense. Eleanor's face had gone completely pale, while Christopher stood frozen in the middle of the dance floor, his mouth slightly open in shock. Dr. Ford continued, his voice warming with genuine pride. Some of you may know me as the founder of the Ford Foundation for Medical Research. What you heard Jasmine describe earlier, her groundbreaking work in maternal health, her 40% reduction in mortality rates, her upcoming publication, represents exactly the kind of innovation and compassion that our foundation exists to support. He put a protective arm around Jasmine's shoulders. I'm delighted to announce that Jasmine will be joining the foundation as our new Director of Community Health Initiatives, overseeing a $50 million program to expand her revolutionary work to communities across the country. The silence that followed was deafening. Jasmine could see people recalculating their earlier assumptions, their expressions shifting from dismissive to impressed to embarrassed. Eleanor looked as if she had been struck by lightning, her carefully orchestrated evening completely derailed. Moreover, Dr. Ford continued, I couldn't be more proud to introduce Isaiah as my great-grandson and heir. This young man will grow up knowing that his family's legacy is one of service, innovation, and positive change in the world. Christopher finally found his voice. He stepped forward, his face a mixture of regret and amazement. Jasmine, I had no idea. I mean, congratulations, this is incredible. Jasmine looked at him with a calmness that surprised even her. 2 years ago, his approval would have meant everything to her. Now it felt irrelevant. Thank you, Christopher, she said simply. I hope you and Priscilla will be very happy together. Priscilla, who had been watching the entire scene with growing discomfort, tugged at Christopher's sleeve. Darling, perhaps we should... But Christopher wasn't listening. He was staring at Jasmine as if seeing her for the first time, and Priscilla's grip on his arm tightened with obvious insecurity. Eleanor finally found her voice, though it came out as little more than a croak. Dr. Ford, we had no idea about your connection to Miss Monroe. If we had known... What would you have done differently? Dr. Ford asked mildly, but his eyes were steel. Would you have treated her with more respect? Shown more kindness? Or would you have simply hidden your prejudice more carefully? The question hung in the air like smoke, and Eleanor had no answer that wouldn't make her situation worse. Around them, guests were beginning to approach Jasmine with congratulations and business cards, the same people who had been whispering behind their hands just minutes earlier. Dr. Ford turned back to Jasmine with a warm smile. My dear, I think we've made quite enough of an impression for one evening. Would you like to come to my home so we can talk properly? I have so many stories about your grandmother that I'd love to share, and I have a feeling Isaiah would enjoy meeting his great-grandfather's golden retriever, Winston. Jasmine nodded, suddenly feeling exhausted by the emotional roller coaster of the evening. As they moved toward the exit, she caught sight of Christopher one more time. He was standing alone now. Priscilla had apparently decided she needed some air, and he looked lost in a way that might have broken her heart 2 years ago. Jasmine, wait, he called out, hurrying to catch up with them. I need to say something. I need you to know that what happened between us, the way I handled it, I was a coward. I let my mother convince me that money and status mattered more than love, and I've regretted it every day since. She studied his face, seeing genuine remorse there. I know, she said quietly, and I forgive you, Christopher. But forgiveness doesn't mean we can go back. Too much has changed. Has it? He asked desperately. I mean, now that everything's different, now that couldn't we try again? Dr. Ford stepped slightly closer to Jasmine, a protective gesture that wasn't lost on Christopher. Isaiah, sensing the tension, reached out toward his great-grandfather with perfect trust. The gesture seemed to give Jasmine strength. Christopher, 2 years ago I would have given anything to hear you say those words, she replied. But I'm not the same person who loved you then. I've built a life I'm proud of, with or without anyone's approval. I don't need to be rescued or validated or accepted into a world that only values me when it's convenient. She shifted Isaiah to her other hip and looked Christopher directly in the eyes. I hope someday you find the courage to live for yourself instead of for your mother's expectations. But that journey is yours to take, not mine to wait for. Christopher's shoulders sagged with the weight of what he'd lost, what he'd thrown away. I understand, he said quietly. But if there's ever a chance, there's someone else, Jasmine said gently, not wanting to be cruel but needing to be clear. Dr. Marcus Johnson. He's a pediatric surgeon at the Children's Hospital. We've been seeing each other for 6 months, and he loves Isaiah like his own son. The final piece of hope died in Christopher's eyes, and Jasmine felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. This chapter of her life was finally, truly closed. As they walked toward the exit, Dr. Ford squeezed Jasmine's hand gently. You handled that with remarkable grace, he said. Your grandmother would have been so proud. 6 months later, Jasmine stood in the conference room of the Ford Foundation's new Community Health Center, looking out at a room full of medical professionals, community leaders, and expectant mothers. Her program had already expanded to 5 cities, and the results were even better than she had hoped. Maternal mortality rates were dropping, infant health was improving, and mothers were getting the care and support they deserved. Isaiah, now 2 years old, was playing in the corner with toys while Dr. Marcus Johnson watched him with the devoted attention of a father. Marcus had proposed 3 weeks ago, presenting Isaiah with a small ring box of his own containing a toy stethoscope. For my son, he had said, making both Jasmine and Isaiah giggle with delight. Dr. Ford had become the grandfather Isaiah had never known he needed, spoiling him with love and attention while teaching him about the family legacy he would someday inherit. Winston, the golden retriever, had become Isaiah's best friend and constant companion. The transformation in Jasmine's life had been remarkable, but the most important change wasn't the money or the prestigious position or even the loving family she'd gained. It was the unshakable knowledge of her own worth, a confidence that had grown from surviving rejection and building something beautiful from the ashes of disappointment. She had heard through mutual friends that Christopher's engagement to Priscilla had ended 2 months after that night at the Blackwood mansion. Apparently, Priscilla had decided that a man who could be so easily swayed by others wasn't someone she could trust with her heart or her future. Christopher was reportedly in therapy, trying to understand how to live an authentic life separate from his mother's expectations. Jasmine wished him well, though she felt no satisfaction in his struggles. Eleanor Blackwood had become something of a pariah in their social circle after word spread about how she had treated Dr. Ford's granddaughter. Several major donors had withdrawn their support from Blackwood Foundation events, citing concerns about the organization's values. Eleanor had attempted to reach out to Jasmine through intermediaries, hoping to arrange some kind of reconciliation that might restore her reputation. Jasmine had politely declined, choosing instead to focus her energy on positive endeavors. As the meeting concluded and participants began to file out, Dr. Ford approached with a smile that had become as familiar and comforting as sunshine. "How did it go?" he asked, settling into the chair beside her. "Better than I dreamed," Jasmine replied, watching Isaiah show Marcus his impressive block tower. "We're going to be able to help so many families." Dr. Ford followed her gaze to the man and child who had become the center of her world. "You know, when I was your age, I thought success meant accumulating wealth and power. It took me far too long to learn that real success is measured by the lives you touch and the love you give." Jasmine smiled, remembering Eleanor's words from that night at the engagement party. "Someone very wise recently reminded me that dignity can't be bought or inherited. It has to be earned every single day." "And you, my dear granddaughter, have earned it in abundance," Dr. Ford said, pulling Isaiah onto his lap as the toddler ran over for cuddles. "Your parents would be so proud of the woman you've become and the mother you are." As they sat there together, 3 generations united by love, loss, and the unwavering belief that every person deserves to be valued for who they truly are, Jasmine reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The pain of rejection had taught her the strength of self-reliance. The challenge of single motherhood had shown her the depth of unconditional love. The cruelty of prejudice had revealed the power of dignity and grace under pressure. Sometimes the greatest gift someone can give you is showing you that you deserve better than what they're offering. Eleanor Blackwood had intended to humiliate and diminish her, but instead had created the circumstances that allowed Jasmine to discover her true family, her life's calling, and the unshakable knowledge of her own immeasurable worth. Every person has a story worth telling, a contribution worth making, and a dignity that cannot be diminished by others' prejudices or limitations. Real wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the lives you touch, the love you give, and the legacy you leave for those who come after you. And sometimes when you have the courage to stand in your truth with grace and dignity, the universe has a way of revealing just how valuable you really are.